What's going on YouTube? JT Reborn here, and welcome back to another edition of After the Movie. I just got done watching The First Omen, and I wanted to get my thoughts on it. So, I haven't actually done an After the Movie in a little bit. I haven't really gone to the theater since Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. That was like a few weeks ago at this point. But I wanted to kind of talk about The First Omen because I was just kind of sitting home like, you know what? I'm going to check this movie out. I didn't get the chance to really see it in theaters. I can watch it now. I've heard a few positive things about this one. It wasn't a huge hit financially from what I gathered, but I'm like, you know what? Let's check this thing out. Let's see how it is. I'm not somebody, I guess I should talk about my history with the Omen franchise. I'm not somebody who's like really seen them all. I haven't seen 4. I haven't watched the 2006 film. I don't remember anything about 2. I think I watched 1, at least a good chunk of it. Like I remember specific sequences from it. I remember the ending with Gregory Peck and all that. And then Omen 3, I remember watching the ending on TV, and it was Sam Neill screaming like a madman. And he's like, Nazarian, you have won nothing! And then basically, like, he kind of just like, it's the end of Damien, he kind of like face plants, and then like God kind of like appears like silhouettedly in the background. You have the Jerry Goldsmith music appearing, and that's pretty much that. I know there's like a TV series sequel of sorts. I think there's a few novels. But I'm not really a huge Omen like connoisseur. Like it's not necessarily like my franchise, my IP that I go back to time and time again. So I didn't really have much in terms of like hype or expectations for this movie going into it. I'm like, okay, you know what? I've heard a few good things. Let's check this thing out. Let's see if it's any good. And I'm here to say that it actually is a pretty solid horror film overall. Not like one of my favorite horror films of all time. And I don't think it's going to be necessarily for everyone. But I quite thought it was like, you know, pretty good overall. So I knew I was going to like this thing when the first kill happened in the movie. And it's a pretty like wild one. And the directing, this is a first-time director. I think her name is Akasha Stevenson, unless I've probably forgotten that. I don't have any notes or anything written down as I'm recording this thing. But for a first-time director, like there's definitely a lot of talent here. The directing is really on point. There's a lot of very disturbing, unsettling sequences sprinkled in throughout this movie. There's one in particular where our lead character, Margaret, is watching kind of this birthing scene. And I don't know if any of you had to watch like the Miracle of Life video in high school health class or something like that, or something. But think of that, but with the real demonic twist to it all. Like there's one scene where I'm just like, oh, that to me was the most unsettling part of the film. But there's not very many jump scares. It's just the sense of dread and unsettling nature is sprinkled in throughout this entire film. So the storyline focuses on this girl, Margaret. This is obviously a prequel to the original film directed by Richard Donner, and it leads directly into that, but it kind of sort of sets up doing like potentially more films by not necessarily like retconning anything in particular, I should say. Like it doesn't contradict what happens in the next film, although it kind of leaves the door open by kind of having its own branch to kind of go off in its own direction. Like this is how Damien was basically born, and then some. Like I said, Margaret is this girl who comes to this place where all of a sudden she's going to go get her vows done and everything, and we find out kind of like what's been going on here. Basically, I mean, there's going to be some light spoilers, I guess. I don't know if it's in the trailers or whatnot, but so there's kind of two halves to the church. Like Father Brennan is the only character I think from the original film that's kind of in here, and basically it comes to find out like there's kind of two halves. There's like two churches, if you will. You have the original, like the church who just kind of like wants to do the teachings and kind of do things right and such. Then you have another side of the church that's a little bit more sinister. It's been in power for many years, and basically they're trying to form the creation of the Antichrist so that they can kind of manipulate, control this Antichrist, and then kind of bring people back to God. And they have done all these weird, crazy experiments, very cult-like. A lot of babies have kind of come and gone, and there's a lot of various circumstances where they're trying to make this thing happen. And there's some very disturbing scenes like that. This is not a movie necessarily for the squeamish, and it's one where I was just like, ooh, that's a little unsettling. Now, there are a few unintentionally funny bits. Like, there's one that's a clear callback to the original film where it's like, it was all for you. And what happens is a disturbing thing, but the way it kind of happens, it's just like, I kind of unintentionally chuckle. And there's one scene where a guy gets hit by a car, and that kind of made me laugh because it was like, I kept thinking back to Scary Movie 3. Like, those are two unintentionally funny bits. Like, the rest of the stuff, I'm sure it'll leave a lot of people kind of freaked out and stuff. Like there's a few jump scares that, like, not too many. There's like maybe two or three. One of them did kind of get me, but I liked the disturbing, unsettling nature of this film sprinkled in throughout. It's a slow burn movie. There's a lot of production value in this thing, surprisingly more than I ever would have expected a prequel to The Omen to be. They definitely threw some money on the screen. You can see it there. Like, it's set in the 1970s. They've recreated the looks of that quite well. They filmed it in, basically, I think it was Rome, and the production value is quite good. And there's some neat looking practical effects in this thing. A lot of stuff is kind of like off camera. They don't want to fully show you. Like, things are kind of like silhouetted and such, and you get kind of glimpses of like maybe a hand or something of some of the more disturbing stuff that they got going on here. But from what I got here, I think it was quite good. There's some good acting involved, especially the lead actress here. She has a lot she has to do. There's a scene where, she has to kind of give birth, and it's a really kind of disturbing bit, and it's directed quite well, but like her performance in that, and like the way, like, there's some body contortions kind of going on, I thought that was all handled quite well. I do have a few iffiness with this thing, because it is a prequel, and this is kind of the unfortunate thing when it comes to prequels, and that is there's no real full, I mean, where it's inevitably going to go unless you've seen the original Omen. It has to lead into it. So a lot of stuff, oh gee, I wonder what's going to happen to this thing. Is Damien actually going to be born or not? Well, yeah, it's obviously going to happen. So stuff like that where it's kind of forced to lead into that, that's the stuff where I'm kind of like, it kind of takes the suspense and tension out of it. But like, if you kind of looked at this as just a standalone thing, not really connected it, never heard of the other Omen stuff, I think it'd probably be better in that sense, rather than kind of like knowing this as a prequel. Although, like, just a lot of stuff set up, it may feel a little unsatisfying because of just kind of the way it ends, because it does end tying right into the first film, not necessarily contradicting it, but also kind of setting the door open for some other potential future entries to kind of explore other things, because everything has to be this long-standing IP stuff. Now, there are a few unanswered questions for sure, and I have to go and watch the other films again because of some of the stuff that happens in here. I like, one thing that's always like irritates me with movies when you get these evil cults that kind of like, oh, we're doing this for God, we're doing this. Like, no, you're not. You're just really kind of doing some really bad, nasty things, and a lot of these characters never get their comeuppance in these types of movies. Like, you look at something like this, or like Wicker Man, or I'm going to think of some other horror movies in recent memory. Ari Aster did this with Hereditary and Midsommar. I actually quite liked Hereditary. Didn't like Midsommar, but you always have these evil, crazy cults or whatever, or the Paranormal Activity franchise. It's like, horror is one of those things where it's more surprising when the bad guys don't win. That's actually kind of like the more surprising end goal for a lot of the stuff, and because you're always kind of expecting the more unhappy ending, and that's kind of the case with this film to an extent. But for the most part, the build up to it is a slow build up. There are some really disturbing sequences and some quite good acting. The music is good as well. They do find a way to integrate the classic Jerry Goldsmith music into this at some point in the film, and it's handled quite well. So, and again, this is coming from somebody who's not this big expert on the Omen franchise. I kind of want to go and watch the remaining films now that I've seen this one, just to kind of see how it all plays out over the course of those like 4 or 5 films. There's also the TV series. I mean, there's alternating timelines in that. Like I said, I'm not huge into the Omen like I am some other franchises. I didn't go and watch every entry before seeing this one. I'm like, oh, it's a prequel. Do I really need to? I'm like, okay, does this lead into this? Does this lead into this? Oh, no, this is going into its own direction. Okay, I gotcha. That makes sense. So yeah, there's that. I'm trying to think what else. So yeah, solid film overall. A lot better than I expected it to be. And there's some surprising twists and turns, a little bit here and there. I mean, a lot of it is kind of predictable. I know, like, we're focusing on this one character the whole time. Like, gee, I wonder who the mother of Damien's going to be. It's kind of obvious from the get-go. But there are some things that they kind of need to kind of play around with that. But yeah, so disturbing stuff, not for the squeamish. I think this film probably has a lot that's been cut out of it, because there are instances where it seems like they were definitely holding back. But for somebody making their feature film directorial debut, I thought they did a pretty good job. The film is slow burn. It feels a little bit more like an older 70s horror film, like something you see from Dario Argento, which I did quite like. very atmospheric. You're going to feel a little creeped out for sure. Not necessarily like pure like screaming and terrified the entire time, but you're going to feel a little unsettled. And I kind of was looking for something like that. And I think this thing did a pretty good job in regards to that. So it's a lot better than any other Omen prequel has any right to be. So there's a few things, like I said, I have nitpicks for. The ending, for example. It's cool how it leads into the original film, but it also kind of that sequel baity nature that they have of it. And because it's a prequel, it kind of takes away some of the suspense. And I just hate evil cults kind of in movies, which we get to see here. The secret society, like they kind of bastardize like the church, if you will, to fit their own thing. Because the church in this, there's two halves. Like I said, there's the good half that just kind of wants to practice these teachings. There's another half that just wants to maintain that power, so they try to like perform all these experiments to birth the Antichrist. And those people, like, those types of characters almost never get their comeuppance in these types of films. It just kind of irritates me and leaves me wanting a more satisfying conclusion. And maybe that happens in here fully. Like, it doesn't fully happen because obviously they have to set things up for the future films. But it just kind of irks me. I'm like, I want an ending to one of these movies where like it's directed completely serious all the way through, and you come and like you have like the Expendables come in and just like shoot all of them and have your big action movie explosion. I think that would be awesome. If I ever made a movie like this, I want an ending just like that, because I want like something satisfying. Like these characters just they kind of irritate me, and they always get away with it. And that's the one thing about horror that I always kind of like can irk me sometimes. It's like it's more surprising when you don't get the sad, depressing, angry ending. I mean, it is kind of like with horror, they kind of have more risks, I think. But it is more satisfying when you kind of get something that kind of goes against those expectations. And when it comes to like my expectations are like, okay, I expect to kind of go in this direction. And generally that's the case for the most part. So when it doesn't go against that, it's a little more surprising. So, and I kind of like that from time to time. But yeah, anyways, I feel like I'm getting off track. If you like the original Omen, I'm sure you're going to quite like this one. I'm sure this is a lot better than it has any right to be. I actually want to see what this director does next. I think there's a lot of talent behind the camera. The lead actress does a good job. There's some freaky stuff. And it's a pretty well-made film. So this is me recommending The First Omen. If you get the chance to, check it out. It's not going to be for everybody. I can't see everybody liking this thing, but I personally thought it was quite good. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. Post your comments down below. Be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content, hit the bell for notifications. I'm going to head out of here. I will try to get back to more after the movie stuff in the near future, but I saw this one, I figured, you know what, I better talk about it before all of it leaves my head. So, all right, well, that's all I have to say. As always, take care now. Bye-bye, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out.